It started with a single siren that split through the quiet country night. Buckingham Park, normally the picture of calm aristocratic grace, was suddenly a stage for chaos. Red and blue lights danced across centuries-old stone, security radios crackled, and somewhere inside the main residence, a princess the world has long called the strongest of them all was hurt. 2 minutes ago, the royal family finally confirmed what had only been whispered since dawn. Princess and the monarch's famously stoic sister was injured during a terrifying security breach on the palace grounds. Injured. That word alone sent shockwaves across Britain. Not startled, not unharmed, but injured, an admission so rare it made reporters freeze mid-sentence. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. What really happened behind those locked gates? How could an intruder have slipped past some of the most expensive surveillance systems in the kingdom? And why did the palace wait hours before saying a single word? For a woman known for her strength, the rider who walked away from a near-fatal horse crash, the royal who once fought off a would-be kidnapper with the words, "not bloody likely." This incident cuts deeper than anyone expected. Because this time, she wasn't confronting the danger head-on. This time, danger came quietly, in the dark, when she least expected it. The official statement, brief and polished, reads like all palace communications: controlled, careful, cold. Her Royal Highness the Princess Royal sustained minor injuries following an incident at her private residence. Minor injuries. But witnesses say otherwise. They speak of shouts echoing across the fields, of frantic movement, of a woman's silhouette stumbling in the half-light. She fell, one guard allegedly told a paramedic. She hit her face. Pause there for a moment. Imagine it. The Princess Royal, revered for her composure, clutching her face as alarms scream around her. For decades, she's been the embodiment of discipline, the steady heartbeat of a family often rattled by scandal. And now, suddenly, she's the story. Why does this matter now? Because security failures in the royal world are never accidents. They're warnings. And when the warning involves Princess and the woman who has quietly held the monarchy's working backbone together for half a century, it suggests something far more serious than a random trespass. Think about the pattern. 1982, a man scales Buckingham Palace walls and enters the Queen's bedroom. 2021, armed drones spotted over Windsor. Each time, the palace promises a review. Each time, the public forgets. But tonight, history repeats with a twist. It reached the one royal no one thought could be caught off guard. Just before midnight, the local constabulary received a coded distress signal from Buckingham's internal security line. Within minutes, response teams flooded the area. Yet by the time they reached the courtyard, the intruder had vanished into the trees, leaving confusion and blood behind. According to one insider, Princess Anne had been moved hastily from her sitting room toward a secure safe room when she tripped over uneven flooring in the panic. She fell hard. The impact left bruising along her cheek and a small laceration near her eye. But those are just the visible wounds. The unseen ones, the violation of safety, the fracture of trust, cut far deeper. You might be wondering, how could something like this happen in 2025 with cameras, sensors, guards, and digital barriers? The uncomfortable answer: the threat wasn't necessarily outside. Sources close to palace staff hint that earlier in the evening, one perimeter alarm had been switched off for maintenance. Maintenance at midnight? A convenient coincidence, or the first sign of something orchestrated. Inside the royal household, silence speaks louder than statements. The delay in public confirmation only fueled suspicion. For nearly 9 hours, journalists camped outside hospital gates without official acknowledgement. When the palace finally broke its silence, the wording raised more questions than it answered. Why specify private residence instead of Buckingham Park by name? Why emphasize minor? Anyone who has followed royal language knows that when they say minor, it usually means don't ask again. But people are asking. Because Princess Anne isn't just another royal headline. She's the symbol of duty itself. Through divorces, scandals, abdication rumors, and health scares, she never faltered. She once attended 540 engagements in a single year. She is the royal who drives herself, who refuses police outriders, who prefers muddy boots to red carpets. And that's what makes this breach so unsettling. It pierced the armor of the monarchy's most grounded figure. Picture the scene inside those walls. A half-empty teacup cooling on a mahogany table. The faint smell of burning from tripped wiring. Guards shouting coded numbers. A horse in the nearby stable whinnying at the sirens. Then footsteps, heavy, running, echoing down a marble corridor. Somewhere between those echoes, the Princess Royal falls. A split second of weightlessness, then pain, then darkness. She's helped to her feet. The guard whispers, "You're safe now, ma'am." But she knows better. Safety, once broken, can't be declared. It has to be rebuilt. And that's the heart of this story. This wasn't just a physical injury. It was an emotional breach. Because for the first time since her youth, and felt fear not for her family, not for the crown, but for herself. The British public reacted instantly. Social media flooded with disbelief. "Impossible," wrote one user. "She's indestructible." Others shared clips from her past, reminders of her strength. The 1974 kidnapping attempt, the equestrian accidents, the countless times she shrugged off pain. Yet beneath the nostalgia ran a current of dread. If even Princess Anne could fall, the monarchy truly isn't untouchable. Meanwhile, inside the palace, lights burned late into the night. Senior aides were summoned from Windsor and London. The king was reportedly informed within minutes. "His Majesty is deeply concerned," said a brief follow-up statement. But behind those words, tension brewed. Who would take the blame for this? The security contractor? The royal household staff? Or someone higher? Here's where it gets murkier. A source familiar with internal procedures claims that one of the external sensors recorded a heat signature inconsistent with wildlife. Translation: a human presence. But the signal disappeared before identification. Either the intruder escaped, or someone erased the footage. And moments later, as guards scrambled to reactivate manual locks, that's when Anne was being moved to the safe corridor. That's when she fell. Coincidence or cover? You decide. Because the timing is too perfect, the reaction too rehearsed. And perhaps that's why insiders are calling this a wake-up call for a royal family still adjusting to a world where enemies don't need swords. They only need access codes. But step back from the conspiracy for a moment. On a human level, imagine waking in the middle of the night to chaos. The home you've trusted for decades, violated. Guards you know by name, panicking. Alarms that were supposed to protect you, failing. Then the pain, the confusion, the shame of being seen vulnerable. That's what Princess Anne faced. And it may explain why, despite her injuries, she insisted no ambulance siren sound as she was driven to the local hospital. She wanted quiet, dignity, control. Control is what defines her. And losing it, even briefly, must have been unbearable. Witnesses say she apologized to staff while bleeding, muttering, "Don't make a fuss." Typical Anne. The stoic mask still intact, while the world beneath it cracked. Now, here's where the story shifts from incident to implication. Because every royal security failure triggers not just internal reviews, but political fallout. The Home Office oversees royal protection, and each breach raises parliamentary scrutiny. Expect questions, headlines, investigations, and whispers about whether the monarchy has become a target again. But amid the bureaucracy and the outrage lies one haunting question that no official will answer. Was the intruder after property, information, or the princess herself? The answer to that could redefine everything we think we know about royal vulnerability. You might recall Anne's defiance decades ago when a kidnapper aimed a gun at her and demanded she step out of the car. Her reply, "Not bloody likely," became legend. She was unflappable then. But now, the weapon isn't visible, the enemy unseen. It's fear itself creeping through the palace halls. And still, even now, the palace insists she is recovering comfortably. Comfortably? After a midnight breach, a head injury, and a security overhaul already underway? That's more than understatement. It's denial wrapped in etiquette. Denial is a royal tradition. They hide illness, suppress scandal, and spin tragedy into protocol. But this incident refuses to fade quietly. Because the wound isn't just on her face, it's on the institution's facade. The question is, how deep does it run? As dawn rose over Gloucestershire, photographers caught the faintest glimpse of a bandaged cheek behind tinted windows. No smile, no wave, Just the stern profile of a woman who's spent her life in service, now facing her most personal test. Outside, reporters shouted questions. None were answered. Yet the silence itself spoke volumes. Something about that night cannot be explained away. Because there's a gap in the timeline, a 45-minute window between the alarm trigger and the first police car's arrival. 45 minutes in which anything could have happened. 45 minutes erased from every official briefing. Where was the intruder? Where was Anne? Who gave the order to delay disclosure? Those are the questions we'll explore next. And as we dig deeper, you'll see why some insiders believe this was not an accident, not random, and certainly not over. Because as one palace aide whispered to a journalist this morning, if you knew what really happened in those minutes, you'd never sleep soundly again. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming that it was supposed to be an ordinary night. The kind of quiet, measured evening that defined Princess Anne's life at Buckingham Park, her sanctuary tucked amid rolling Gloucestershire fields. A few lamps glowed softly through lace curtains. The dogs had already settled near the fireplace. The last of the staff had retreated to their quarters. Outside, the air carried that cold, clean stillness unique to English countryside nights. Nothing stirred, nothing threatened, until it did. At exactly 11:47 p.m., that stillness broke. The first sound wasn't the siren, that came later. It was the rustle of gravel, the crunch of a shoe where no shoe should be. The cameras, 13 of them positioned across the estate, caught a flicker, a shadow that moved against the wind. What followed was chaos disguised as confusion. Inside the main house, Anne sat reviewing papers, charity correspondence, equestrian schedules, the usual business of her ever-busy life. Her reading glasses rested low on her nose when the first alarm light blinked in the corner of the room. A soft red pulse. She barely noticed. A guard appeared seconds later. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "we've had a perimeter trip." She looked up, calm as ever. "Foxes again." He didn't answer. His earpiece buzzed with overlapping voices. Another guard's voice came through, urgent, breathless. "North Gate breach confirmed. Visual contact uncertain. Possible intruder." That word, intruder, snapped years of composure into action. Princess Anne stood immediately. No panic, no visible fear. Just that crisp, soldier-like efficiency that made her the royal family's unspoken anchor. "Let's move," she ordered. She wasn't new to danger. Not after 1974. Not after that night when a man stopped her car on the Mall and demanded ransom. She still remembered the glare of headlights, the smell of gunpowder, the sharp clarity of her own voice saying, "Not bloody likely." But this was different. That was public chaos. This was private invasion. The guard led her through the hallway toward the reinforced corridor leading to the estate's safe room. The lights flickered once. Then again. Power glitch. The backup generator kicked in, too slowly. For approximately 40 seconds, Buckingham Park went dark. Imagine that scene, a royal residence swallowed by blackout. Outside, distant alarms starting to wail. Inside, the faint scuff of boots on marble. And in the center of it all, the Princess Royal, walking quickly, one hand trailing the wall to steady herself, the other gripping her phone though there was no signal. What happened next unfolded in seconds, but would replay in slow motion for every investigator who later walked that hall. A flash of movement, someone shouting behind, "Stay down." A sudden shove from a security officer trying to guide her around a corner. And then, impact. Her heel caught the edge of a rug. Her head snapped forward. The marble met her cheekbone with a sickening crack. Silence. The next thing she felt was warmth. Not pain at first, just warmth spreading beneath her eye. Then the metallic tang of blood. "Ma'am, don't move," the guard said, kneeling beside her. But Anne, true to form, tried to push herself up. "I'm fine," she muttered. "Get on with it." Those who know her describe her as indestructible. The kind of woman who can tumble from a horse, dust off, and continue the round. But even indestructible things fracture when the foundation trembles. Security footage from another camera, one of the few still operating, shows guards sprinting through the western wing, weapons drawn. One shouts, "North entrance compromised." Another, "I've got movement near the paddocks." The intruder, or whatever they were, had vanished into the night. And yet, inside, the damage was done. When the lights flickered back, the guards found the princess sitting upright, blood seeping down her face, a handkerchief pressed to her cheek. "Minor," she insisted again and again, voice steady but eyes unfocused. She hated fuss. Always did. But beneath her composure, fear had already set in. The sirens began around 11:55 p.m. Police arrived 7 minutes later. The intruder was gone, leaving only footprints in the mud near the north gate and the faint impression of latex gloves on the handle. No DNA, no trace, just mystery. In the hours that followed, Buckingham Park turned into an active crime scene. Officers swarmed the grounds. Drones scanned the perimeter. Thermal cameras swept the fields. The royal family's private protection service, often invisible, suddenly became visible, grim-faced, communicating in clipped phrases. By midnight, the news had already leaked. It always leaks. A journalist from a London tabloid received an anonymous message. Emergency at Buckingham. Princess injured. Not minor. Within 20 minutes, social media was aflame. Breaking, unconfirmed reports of security incident at Princess Anne's home. Photographs soon followed, blurry shots of police cars on the estate's narrow road. But inside those walls, it wasn't about headlines. It was about confusion. Guards whispered theories. Some swore they saw two figures near the fence line. Others believed it was a diversion, a decoy meant to draw security away while something else happened inside. And somewhere in that confusion, Princess Anne's world tilted. Doctors arrived just before 12:30 a.m. They recommended immediate hospital evaluation. She refused. "Not necessary," she said sharply. "We have guests tomorrow." It took her personal physician, summoned from Cirencesta, to persuade her otherwise. As they escorted her to the waiting car, witnesses say she walked unaided, chin high, blood drying against pale skin. The bandage on her face couldn't hide the bruise forming beneath. When asked if she wanted lights or sirens, she shook her head. "No attention," she said simply. "Not tonight." That's the kind of defiance that made her beloved and feared within palace circles. She never dramatized pain, never sought sympathy. But what she didn't realize, perhaps, was that the story was already spiraling beyond control. By dawn, the internet was a storm of speculation. Was it an assassination attempt? Is she okay? Was the intruder caught? Is this connected to threats against King Charles? No one knew. Everyone guessed. And the palace said nothing. Silence has power. It breeds both protection and paranoia. And as the morning unfolded, silence became strategy. At 6:10 a.m., an official convoy left the estate. Unmarked vehicles carrying documents, laptops, and personal effects. The kind of discreet cleanup that signals something bigger than minor. One insider later claimed certain security logs were corrupted. Another said the footage was too dark to analyze. Too dark or too damaging. Behind closed doors, royal officials began their internal review. How did the system fail? Why was one sensor offline for maintenance at that exact moment? Why did it take nearly 8 minutes for on-site guards to secure visual confirmation? The answers were tangled in protocol and secrecy. Meanwhile, inside the hospital's private wing, Princess Anne received stitches and a concussion assessment. When staff asked about pain, she reportedly quipped, "Had worse from a horse." Humor is armor. Always the same. But one nurse, speaking anonymously, later told a reporter that the princess seemed shaken, not by the injury itself, but by something else. She kept asking if everyone else was accounted for, the nurse said. Not herself, everyone else. That single line captured who she is. Selfless to a fault. But it also hinted at something deeper. Had she seen something that night that others hadn't? The official report would later call it a security anomaly. That phrase, bureaucratic, bloodless, covers a multitude of sins. Anomaly means unexplainable or unspoken. It doesn't say whether the intruder was caught, whether the system was hacked, or whether an insider helped. It simply closes the file and waits for the next time. But there's a growing sense among palace insiders that this time won't fade quietly, because this wasn't the random madness of a lone trespasser. It was coordinated, deliberate, precise. Even the weather played its part. Thick fog rolling in from the Cotswolds, muffling footsteps, distorting light. Investigators later noted that the timing coincided with a scheduled maintenance shift. Fewer guards, lower alertness, perfect window. Someone knew. And while the tabloids turned it into a frenzy. Complete with recycled stock images of and on horseback, smiling, The reality behind those walls was far from heroic. It was messy, human, terrified. Imagine the royal staff that night. One maid hiding behind the pantry door, hands trembling. A stable hand watching police lights flash across the fields, wondering if he'd lose his job for speaking to reporters. The butler standing in the hallway outside the sitting room, staring at a single drop of blood on the floor, not sure whether to clean it or leave it as evidence. Those small, silent moments never make headlines, but they tell the truth about what it feels like when the walls meant to keep the world out suddenly fail. At around 3 a.m., the king's private secretary made the call to Balmoral, where Charles was staying for a brief rest. The conversation was short. "Your sister has sustained an injury during a security incident," the aide said. There was a pause. Then, "Is she conscious?" "She is." "Then keep it contained." Contained. Another royal tradition. When things fall apart, contain the narrative before it spreads. But this time, the narrative was already halfway around the globe. In Australia, morning news shows led with the headline, "Royal Emergency at Gatcombe." In America, late-night hosts speculated wildly. And across Britain, ordinary citizens found themselves asking, how could this happen to her? That's the question that will haunt the monarchy for weeks to come. Because the answer lies not just in faulty cameras or tired guards. It lies in complacency. The belief that the past can't repeat itself. The illusion that tradition equals protection. But here's the chilling truth. This isn't the first time Anne has faced danger. And it might not be the last. Because deep within the palace archives are records, quietly classified, of threats received over the years. Letters, emails, unsolved trespasses, patterns that point to someone who knows the routines, the weak spots, the human side of royal defense. Someone who may have been waiting for the perfect night to test the system again. And that night, everything aligned. The fog, the maintenance, the fatigue, the trust. Now, with her resting under guard and investigators combing every inch of Gatcombe Park, one question lingers heavier than all the rest. Did the intruder escape, or did they never leave at all? Because according to a leaked early morning report, one motion sensor inside the western greenhouse was tripped again. 3 hours after the police sweep was supposedly complete. 3 hours after they declared the grounds secure. Someone, or something, was still moving in the shadows. But what investigators found when they returned to check that signal would make even seasoned officers lose sleep. And that's where the story takes its first real turn. Because the man who triggered that alarm, the one believed to have vanished, had been seen before. The image was grainy, black and white, the kind of footage that looks almost meaningless until you stare long enough for the details to start speaking. There, by the north gate, a silhouette. Human, broad-shouldered, moving low, with purpose. Not a drunk trespasser or lost tourist. Someone who knew exactly where they were going. Investigators paused the footage at frame 214. The figure's head turned just enough to reveal the faint glint of something metallic. Maybe a flashlight, maybe a tool. But what caught their attention wasn't what the intruder carried. It was what they wore. A maintenance vest. Gatcombe Park maintenance staff don't work at midnight. And yet, there it was. Reflective strips, faintly visible. The same kind issued to royal contractors. That meant one of two things. Either this person had stolen a uniform, or someone had given it to them. And that's when the theory of a random intruder began to crumble. Because whoever breached those gates knew the layout. They knew the timing of guard rotations. They knew which cameras were temporarily offline, and which routes would keep them invisible until the last moment. That isn't luck. That's insider knowledge. For years, Gatcombe Park was considered one of the safest royal estates precisely because of its privacy. No tourists, no official tours, no daily crowds. A fortress disguised as farmland. But that same privacy also made it vulnerable. There were fewer witnesses, fewer eyes, fewer chances for anyone outside the circle to see what really goes on inside. And that night, that isolation became the perfect accomplice. When police first reviewed the entry logs, something immediately stood out. No forced entry. The north gate hadn't been broken or cut. It was opened. Not wide, not obvious, just enough for one person to slip through before it automatically closed. That indicated access to the gate's internal code. Impossible, said one officer. Only 4 people have that code. 4 people. And one of them was off duty that night. Let that sink in. Someone had either leaked the code or cloned the signal. Both require planning, precision, and, most chilling of all, help. A week earlier, according to estate records, a subcontractor from a private security firm had been on site repairing an infrared sensor near that same gate. He signed in under the name T. Barlow. Routine maintenance, the log said. But after the incident, when investigators tried to contact him, they discovered something unsettling. There was no T. Barlow registered with the firm. No invoices. No records of his employment. The ID badge used that day was legitimate, but belonged to a different worker who was on leave abroad. The fake contractor had entered the estate in broad daylight, worked for nearly an hour, and left without suspicion. And now, 7 days later, someone used the same gate to get in. Coincidence? Or choreography? The Royal Protection Unit doesn't believe in coincidences. They began piecing together the days leading up to the breach, delivery schedules, staffing rosters, CCTV rotations. Slowly, a pattern emerged. Certain cameras were placed on low-power mode for maintenance testing. A handful of security personnel were reassigned temporarily. And that night's main supervisor? He'd left 20 minutes early due to a family emergency. That phrase, family emergency, would appear again and again in the days to come, a convenient blanket over a dozen questions no one wanted to answer. But who was the intruder? One source describes the figure as male, mid-30s, average height, wearing dark clothing under the vest. Others insist the posture was military, the kind of controlled, deliberate movement of someone trained not to panic under pressure. And then there was the strangest detail of all. At one point, before disappearing behind a hedge, the intruder appeared to pause and look directly at the nearest camera. Not accidentally, intentionally, as if to say, "I know you're watching." That moment would send chills through every investigator who saw it. Because it wasn't the look of surprise. It was recognition. When you think of the royal family, it's easy to imagine the institution as impenetrable, a fortress of polished marble and security details thicker than a presidential convoy. But the truth is, their safety depends on human beings. Guards get tired. Technicians make mistakes. And every system, no matter how advanced, has its weakest link, trust. What if that link broke from within? Insiders began whispering about staff turnover at Buckingham Park in the months before the breach. Several long-serving employees had retired or been reassigned. A few new faces had joined: temporary contractors, kitchen help, landscapers. None of them vetted through the same rigorous channels as full royal aides. It's a small estate. Procedures are looser, more personal. The perfect environment for infiltration. That's not paranoia, it's precedent. Remember the infamous 1982 Michael Fagan incident? A man climbed Buckingham Palace's wall and walked straight into the Queen's bedroom because a security alarm was under repair. Different palace, same pattern. Now, over 4 decades later, another maintenance lapse had allowed someone dangerously close to another royal. But motive, that's the missing piece. What was this person after? There are 3 leading theories whispered among royal watchers and insiders alike. First, espionage. Security experts say Buckingham Park's modesty makes it a soft target for anyone seeking internal royal communications. The estate houses not just, but also private offices for charities she supports. Access to those files could expose donor lists, financial details, even personal correspondence. Second, message. Some believe the intruder wanted to send a symbolic warning, a statement about the monarchy's vulnerability during turbulent times. The fact that the breach happened amid rising public anger over royal spending has not gone unnoticed. Third, personal fixation. Princess Anne, for all her privacy, has always attracted intense admiration. In recent years, online forums dedicated to royal truthers have grown darker, blending admiration with obsession. Could this have been the act of a disturbed admirer, or someone from her past seeking attention? We don't know. Not yet. But every path leads to the same unnerving conclusion. This person knew the estate better than they should have. And here's where the story takes another strange twist. When investigators expanded their search perimeter beyond Buckingham, they discovered something peculiar in a wooded area about 400 meters from the property's north fence. A small, makeshift campsite. A thermal blanket. 2 disposable coffee cups. A torn notebook page with scribbled coordinates. The handwriting was neat. Almost professional. On the back of the page was a series of numbers, timestamps. They matched the rotation schedule of Gatcombe's external patrols. That means whoever camped there had studied royal security patterns long before the breach. A seasoned investigator later told a reporter off record, "This wasn't just some bloke wandering in for a thrill. He'd done reconnaissance. He'd tested the system before. This was step 2 in something bigger." Step 2. So what was step 1? A few staff members recalled something odd 2 nights before the incident. A power outage in one wing of the estate lasting 15 minutes. It was dismissed as a blown fuse. But technicians now suspect deliberate tampering with a power relay, possibly to test response time. Someone was probing defenses, mapping blind spots, and then they struck. But perhaps the most chilling discovery came from an unexpected source. When digital analysts reviewed the security footage metadata, they found that one of the camera feeds, camera 6, overlooking the courtyard, had been remotely accessed hours before the breach. The login originated from an IP address registered to a former employee, the same employee who resigned abruptly 6 months ago after a disagreement with management. Suddenly, the picture started forming. This wasn't just a breach, it was a message, one directed at the royal system itself. Because beneath all the politeness and ceremony, the palace runs like a business. Contracts, hierarchies, loyalties bought and sold. And when someone feels cast out or wronged, revenge can be meticulous. In that world, betrayal doesn't come with shouting. It comes with silence and a stolen keycard. By morning, law enforcement expanded the investigation nationwide, tracing connections between the fake contractor and recently terminated staff. But so far, no arrests, no identities, no confessions. Just ghosts moving through the digital trail. Yet one witness broke the silence. A groundskeeper, who had been patrolling near the stables, claimed he saw something the night before the breach. "There was a man in the distance," he said, "near the tree line. I called out. He didn't move. He just stood there, like he was waiting for something." Waiting for what? The next day, the same groundskeeper found a cigarette, but at that spot. It wasn't an English brand. It was from Eastern Europe. Investigators sent it for DNA analysis. The results, according to leaked reports, did not match any current staff. But here's the part that keeps people awake. The DNA partially matched a profile from an unsolved intrusion at Windsor Castle 2 years ago. That incident, dismissed at the time as a false alarm, also involved a mysterious figure in a high-visibility vest who disappeared before guards could intercept him. Could it be the same person? If so, this isn't a one-time breach. It's a campaign. Someone, or some group, is testing the monarchy, pushing the limits, waiting for the moment when the system fails completely. And maybe that's what makes this story more terrifying than tragic. The fall wasn't just a stumble, it was a symbol. The night the monarchy's most dependable pillar was hurt wasn't random. It was calculated. For now, the palace insists the investigation is ongoing. But sources hint that new evidence has surfaced. A small object recovered near the broken hedges where the intruder was last seen. Something metallic. Something that shouldn't have been there. And when forensic teams analyzed it, they realized it wasn't just a tool. It was a message, because etched faintly along one side of that object was a single word, one that no one in the royal household will publicly admit seeing. A word that connects to a past breach the family thought they'd buried years ago. And the moment investigators deciphered it, the tone inside the royal war room changed from concern to fear. But what exactly did they find under those hedges? And what secret does that object reveal about the royal family's most guarded home? That discovery will unravel the illusion of safety once and for all. Because the object they uncovered wasn't a weapon. It was a symbol. And what it meant will shake the monarchy to its core. Buckingham Park has always been a contradiction. To outsiders, it's a peaceful countryside estate, the kind you see on glossy postcards, all emerald lawns and ivy-clad walls. But beneath that postcard calm lies one of Britain's most secretive royal compounds, a private fortress designed not for grandeur, but for survival. Princess and never wanted palaces. She preferred practicality to pomp. So when she chose Buckingham as her primary residence, she asked for privacy, horses, and security. What she received was a layered fortress disguised as rural simplicity, a place where every stone, every fence, and every light switch hides a deeper story. Yet the night of the breach shattered that illusion. Because if Buckingham, her sanctuary, could be infiltrated, then nowhere in the royal network is truly safe. Let's pull back the curtain on this so-called fortress. The main house, built in the late 18th century, rests at the center of roughly 700 acres. Around it, concentric layers of protection, electric fencing, motion sensors, CCTV cameras, guard patrols, infrared tripwires, and, most critically, digital access gates controlled from a security hub in the West Annex. In theory, it's impregnable, but in practice, every fortress has a blind spot. And on that night, someone found it. Investigators began reconstructing the estate's blueprint, mapping every possible route from the outer gate to the sitting room where the princess had been. They discovered something curious, a maintenance corridor sealed off for years, connecting the older wing to a now-unused storage cellar. Few staff even knew it existed. Yet fresh footprints were found there. Prints that didn't match any guard or household employee. That corridor, according to one former aide, was part of an older escape route built during wartime. A passage for emergencies, never logged in modern plans, rarely mentioned. Somehow, the intruder knew about it. How? The answer, investigators suspect, lies not in modern technology, but in history. When Buckingham was renovated in the 1970s, detailed architectural records were submitted to the council. Those records, including layout schematics, are publicly accessible through archives. Most people would never think to look. But someone patient enough, someone who knows the estate's lineage, could easily study those blueprints and plan a path invisible to most. The breach, then, wasn't a failure of modern defense. It was a ghost slipping through history's cracks. But that wasn't the only discovery. For weeks, staff had reported hearing strange noises near the stables late at night, the kind of subtle disturbances dismissed as wildlife. Now, viewed in hindsight, they look like reconnaissance attempts. Whoever the intruder was, they'd been testing the perimeter for days. Royal security officials later confirmed the breach likely began outside the stables, where a section of infrared sensors had been temporarily disabled for routine maintenance. That phrase again, routine, as if danger announces itself politely. When questioned, the head of maintenance insisted the system had been certified operational hours earlier. But the logs tell a different story. A remote override was issued from an internal terminal at 11:41 p.m., just 6 minutes before the breach alert. The code used matched a staff ID, belonging to a worker who'd been asleep in his quarters. That meant one of two things. His credentials had been cloned, or someone else inside had used them deliberately. Either way, it meant betrayal. The palace doesn't like that word. It tastes too close to treason. But it lingers here nonetheless, echoing through every marble corridor and shadowed hallway. And herself, lying in her hospital bed the next day, reportedly asked just one question. Was it one of ours? Those 5 words have haunted every official briefing since. Because the truth is, Buckingham's biggest secret isn't the technology guarding it. It's the quiet network of human trust that keeps it running. From groundskeepers to kitchen staff, from night guards to stable hands, each plays a role. They live and work in proximity to a royal life, yet never truly belong to it. And sometimes, proximity breeds resentment. Several former employees have spoken, anonymously of course, about the unspoken hierarchy within the estate. "You're invisible," one said. "You keep their world running, but they never really see you." Another added, "When you leave, you're forgotten the next day. But some of us remember." Perhaps that's the danger of being both private and royal. The intimacy makes breaches personal. By the second day of the investigation, the royal household had closed off the entire property. Forensic teams combed through every inch of the grounds. They even brought in scent-tracking dogs from Wiltshire, who traced a trail leading from the stables, through a cluster of trees, and ending abruptly at the edge of the eastern pond. The trail just stopped. No footprints beyond that point. No sign of departure. But divers later found something strange beneath the surface, a small waterproof pouch containing a disposable phone. No SIM card. Just one saved contact, labeled only M. When the tech analysts recovered its limited data, they discovered recent timestamps corresponding exactly to the hours before the breach, but no messages, no calls, no GPS logs. As if someone had wiped it clean. Almost clean. One image remained, deeply embedded in the cache. It showed a corner of the Buckingham Gatehouse, taken from inside the property. The meaning was clear. Whoever took that photo had already been inside the estate before the night of the breach. That revelation changed everything. The security chief who briefed King Charles reportedly used just 3 words: compromised from within. It's a phrase the monarchy dreads, because once an inside breach occurs, the entire ecosystem of royal security collapses like dominoes. Every guard's loyalty comes under suspicion. Every contractor's past is re-examined. And once trust erodes, even the palace's ancient walls can't hide the unease. The king's immediate order was to review security at all royal residences, not just Gatcombe, but Balmoral, Clarence House, Sandringham, even Highgrove. But privately, aides admitted this review was less about technology and more about people who had access, who could be swayed, who might already be compromised. And through all of this, Princess and said little. Those close to her describe her demeanor as controlled fury. Not fear, never fear, but deep, simmering anger. She blames herself, one confidant said. She sees it as a personal failure, as though she should have anticipated it. That's the paradox of royalty. They live within fortresses yet are expected to feel nothing when the walls crack. Still, there's something almost symbolic about the setting. Gatcombe Park, built on centuries of heritage, now carrying the weight of modern intrusion. It's as if history itself is reminding the royals that no amount of legacy guarantees safety. Consider this. The same grounds that once hosted royal picnics and family barbecues are now dotted with forensic tents. The same courtyard where and wave to guests now cordoned off with yellow tape. The estate's tranquility gone. And yet, amid all that, there remains one room the investigators found especially peculiar: the old library. During their sweep, they discovered a window latch slightly misaligned, as if tampered with from inside. On the windowsill, faint smudges consistent with gloves. And next to the desk, a small fragment of metal, later identified as a piece of micro-tooling used by locksmiths. The implication? The intruder may not have entered through brute force at all. They might have already been inside before nightfall, hiding in plain sight. That possibility terrified the royal protection team more than any external breach, because it means the system wasn't defeated, it was bypassed. Days later, when the security report reached senior government officials, one line stood out in bold. Evidence suggests familiarity with estate operations and internal architecture. Insider assistance highly probable. But that assistance might not have been voluntary. Remember that disposable phone found in the pond? Digital reconstruction revealed faint traces of messaging metadata tied to a known encrypted platform used in blackmail operations. That raised an entirely new question. Was someone within the estate coerced into helping the intruder? If so, who and why? Some investigators believe the intruder wasn't targeting and herself, but rather something or someone inside Gatcombe Park. Something worth the risk. A document, perhaps. A device. Or a secret buried in the estate's private archives. Because Gatcombe, for all its pastoral charm, also houses decades of private correspondence between senior royals and foreign organizations. Letters, contracts, philanthropic records, materials that, if leaked, could embarrass not only but the entire monarchy. Is it possible the breach was meant to retrieve or destroy something hidden? One former intelligence officer, speaking under anonymity, gave a chilling statement. Gatcombe isn't just a home. It's a repository, and repositories attract ghosts. He refused to elaborate, but his words suggest there's more buried beneath those rolling hills than anyone outside the royal circle truly knows. And the strangest part? During the post-breach audit, technicians uncovered yet another anomaly, a network ping from a dormant system labeled Archive B. No one could identify it. The estate's IT department swore such a system didn't exist. Yet there it was, active for 23 seconds at the exact moment the alarm sounded. Archive B. 2 words that now haunt every royal investigator. Was it a hidden server? A forgotten storage vault? Or something far more secret? A database the palace had deliberately erased from official record? Whatever it was, the intruder seemed to know it existed. And the deeper investigators looked, the clearer the pattern became. This wasn't just a random breach. It was a precise strike aimed at uncovering something long buried within those walls. For years, Gatcombe has been the quiet backbone of royal logistics, the place where correspondence was stored, where private diaries from past generations were archived, where no paparazzi lens could reach. Now, that secrecy itself had become the weapon against them. Because sometimes the past doesn't sleep. Sometimes it comes knocking, disguised as a shadow slipping through the fog. And that shadow left behind a single clue, one that would lead investigators straight to the most shocking discovery yet. A clue so small it almost went unnoticed. A single fiber lodged in a floor vent of the unused corridor. Synthetic, non-British origin. When tested, the fiber matched material used in high-end tactical uniforms manufactured for private security contractors, based in Eastern Europe. And remember that cigarette, but from Chapter 2? Same region, same source. Coincidence? No. The picture was forming. Someone had been testing royal defenses for years, using methods more professional than personal. But the question now wasn't just who. It was why now? Why target Princess and, the most dutiful, least controversial royal of them all? Why risk everything for her? Some say she was the easiest target, quieter, more isolated, fewer press eyes. Others whisper something darker, that she wasn't the target at all, but the distraction. That the breach at Gatcombe was merely a cover for another operation unfolding elsewhere, on the same night, in another royal property. Investigators cross-referenced timestamps, and what they found suggested just that, simultaneous anomalies detected briefly at a secondary estate. That connection would soon explode into a royal-wide scandal. Because when the evidence from Gatcombe's hidden archive B finally surfaced, it exposed something that no one at the palace wanted the world to see. And it all began with what was found buried beneath those hedges. A metallic object, faintly engraved with a single word. A word that led investigators straight into the royal archives. A word that hinted at secrets buried deep beneath the foundations of Gatcombe Park itself. That word was Orion. But what Orion means, and how it ties to Princess Anne's injury, would rewrite the story entirely. The fall itself lasted less than a second, but its impact would ripple for weeks. It began with confusion, noise, and motion, three ingredients that don't belong inside a royal residence built for silence. As alarms wailed through the marble hall, Princess Anne, escorted by two guards, was halfway down the east corridor when the lights flickered again. That split second of darkness changed everything. She felt a shove, firm but protective, guiding her toward the safe room entrance. Then her heels slipped against the polished stone. The floor, waxed that morning, offered no friction. Her weight pitched forward, her arms swung out, and the world narrowed to the sound of her own body hitting the ground. A dull thud, a gasp, a rush of air leaving her chest. When the lights snapped back, she was on one knee, dazed, hand trembling against the floor. Her cheek burned, wet and warm. Blood. The guard bent down, eyes wide, muttering, "Stay down, ma'am. We've got you." But and didn't stay down. She never does. She pressed the handkerchief against her face and stood. "Keep moving," she said, voice low but steady. "Don't stop." That single sentence, "Don't stop," would later become symbolic. It wasn't just an order. It was who she was. The royal who never yielded, even when the crown around her seemed to crumble. Still, this wasn't the battlefield or the parade ground. This was home. And something about the atmosphere, the chaos, the adrenaline, made even her steadiness falter. Eyewitness reports from that night vary slightly, but all share one unsettling detail. Moments before the fall, and looked behind her, as if she'd seen something. One guard insists he heard her whisper, "Who's there?" Another swears she reached toward the far end of the corridor, eyes fixed on something in the dark. But no one else saw it. No figure, no shadow, nothing. Could it have been the intruder? Or was it something else? A reflection, a trick of fear? Whatever she saw, it was enough to break her rhythm. And that hesitation cost her balance. After the impact, the guards managed to get her into the safe room, a compact, reinforced space lined with communication equipment and a medical kit. A doctor was on his way, but Anne refused to sit. "Just a bruise," she said, pressing an ice pack to her cheek. "Secure the house." At that same moment, outside, a storm was breaking over Gloucestershire. Rain hammered the fields, lightning flashed over the tree-line, and the once quiet estate turned into a labyrinth of flashing lights and shouting voices. Investigators would later describe the entire sequence, from alarm trigger to medical evacuation, as a symphony of confusion. Everyone moved, but no one seemed in control. The breach had flipped every royal protocol upside down. Inside the safe room, Zaid handed her a small mirror. The reflection staring back was unrecognizable. Blood on her collar, swelling along the cheekbone, a smear of crimson against her neck. The sight didn't frighten her, it infuriated her. "This shouldn't have happened," she said quietly. Those who know her say the words carried more pain than the fall itself. For and injury was never personal, it was an inconvenience. But this was different. This was an insult. The palace tried to downplay the incident, calling it a minor slip during a precautionary security maneuver. But leaked medical notes tell another story. They describe a contusion with subdermal bruising and mild concussion indicators. Translation: she hit the floor hard. Even more curious is the timeline. According to official reports, she was moved to the safe room at 11:51 p.m., yet surveillance data shows the safe room door closing at 11:56. That's a 5-minute gap, unaccounted for. What happened during those missing minutes? Some believe she briefly lost consciousness. Others say she refused assistance until she was sure her staff were secure. But one source, a paramedic who later arrived at the scene, claims the delay wasn't about treatment. It was about something, and said after standing up. "She told us, he was here," the paramedic recalled. "We didn't know what she meant. When I asked who, she just shook her head and said, 'Check the hall.'" He. A single word that rewrote the incident from accident to assault. If true, that means she saw the intruder face to face. And that would explain the fear hidden behind the palace's silence. Because if the Princess Royal actually encountered the person inside Buckingham Park, it means the breach wasn't stopped, it was interrupted. The palace's refusal to confirm or deny that detail only fuels speculation. But there's one clue hiding in plain sight: the metallic object found under the hedges hours later. That engraved word, Orion, now looked less like a code name and more like a signature. Who signs a crime scene? Someone who wants to be recognized. Someone sending a message. Perhaps, and was the intended recipient. Those who know her best say she's not easily intimidated. But even she was reportedly unsettled in the days following the attack. Friends describe her as unusually quiet, spending hours walking the grounds alone with her dogs, flanked at a distance by new security details. One close confidant put it simply: she's replaying it, over and over. And yet, despite her injury, and insisted on maintaining her schedule, within 48 hours, she attended a charity meeting via video call, her face visibly bruised but expression unchanged. "It'll heal," she said dryly when a friend mentioned concern. Still, palace aides were struggling behind the scenes. The Royal Household Communications Office had drafted 3 versions of a press statement, one calling it a security incident, another blaming technical malfunctions, and a third, which was never released, describing it as a coordinated intrusion under investigation. Guess which one they chose? The sanitized version. Because in the royal world, control of perception is everything. A stumble can be forgiven. A breach cannot. But the British press isn't easily fooled. They noticed the inconsistencies immediately, the timeline gaps, the vague language, the refusal to release images of Anne's injury. Reporters began asking dangerous questions. And that's when the cover-up began to take shape. According to leaked communications between palace staff, there was an explicit directive issued less than 12 hours after the incident. No visual confirmation, no commentary, minimal engagement. Translation: erase the story before it grows legs. Meanwhile, investigators continued their quiet work. And what they found would soon make even the most seasoned royal correspondent's blood run cold. The floor where and fell had faint traces of a foreign residue, small, oily streaks along the marble tile. Laboratory analysis later identified it as a synthetic lubricant commonly used in lockpicking tools and stealth gear. In other words, someone carrying equipment had been in that corridor shortly before her fall. Was the residue fresh? Yes. Was it consistent with the fake contractor seen in prior footage? Possibly. That meant the intruder might have been mere feet from her before she slipped. Close enough to leave traces, close enough to watch. It's a chilling thought. While she was walking towards safety, someone might have been standing in the shadows, waiting. What was the goal? Was the intruder startled when the guards turned the corner? didn't fall because of panic, or because someone deliberately caused the distraction? Those are questions even investigators can't answer yet. What's known as this: Princess Anne's fall wasn't random. Every indicator, from the timing to the sensor override to the residue, points to a planned sequence. Someone orchestrated chaos inside her own home. And though the palace continues to describe the incident as an unfortunate mishap, insiders have begun whispering that the truth is far darker. Some say the attacker wanted to hurt her. Others think she was never the target, that she got in the way of something else. But the one detail almost no one talks about publicly is the photograph. Yes, a photograph, found later on that same disposable phone retrieved from the pond, hidden deep in the cache data. It shows Anne's east corridor, taken from a distance, before the night of the breach. The frame is slightly tilted, as if captured through partially opened doors. That image proves premeditation. It also proves access. Whoever took it had been inside the private quarters days earlier. So if you believe this was an accident, look at that photograph again. It says otherwise. By now, public concern had turned to fascination. News anchors speculated about palace espionage. Commentators revisited the monarchy's history of internal betrayal. And conspiracy forums, those corners of the internet that thrive on royal secrecy, erupted with theories: foreign agents, rogue staff, even political retribution. Most are nonsense. But one thread keeps resurfacing: the word Orion. What does it mean? A code name? A group? A warning? A senior official reportedly described it as a marker, a signature left by someone who wants us to remember. Remember what, though? That's what we'll uncover next. Because as investigators dug deeper, they began noticing an unsettling pattern: incidents eerily similar to Gacham's breach, all quietly buried over the years. Each had one thing in common: a missing object, a wiped camera, and a name linked, somehow, to Orion. And that's where the cover-up begins. Because the fall wasn't the end of Princess Anne's ordeal. It was the beginning of something much larger, a royal secret that's been protected for decades. And the palace is desperate to keep it buried. But what they didn't count on was that the very evidence they tried to hide would leak. And when it did, the public would realize that Princess Anne's accident was part of a much deeper deception, one that reaches all the way to the crown. What came next would shake the monarchy's credibility more than any scandal in its modern history. Because someone inside the palace wanted this story erased, and they were willing to lie to the nation to do it. It began with silence. The kind of silence that doesn't just conceal, but controls. Within hours of the incident at Buckingham Park, that silence hardened into strategy. The royal family, masters of measured words and calculated restraint, shifted into crisis management mode. But this time, the script was different. The cover-up didn't start with a denial, it started with a delay. The longer they waited to speak, the more they could sculpt the story. Every minute of silence bought time to rewrite reality. And for a while, it worked. Until it didn't. At 6:45 a.m. the morning after the breach, the Royal Communications Office convened an emergency meeting inside Clarence House. Senior aides, PR directors, and security liaisons huddled around a long oak table, faces pale under the fluorescent light. The goal was simple: contain the chaos before the press tore it apart. Public reassurance, one advisor said, jotting notes furiously. We emphasize stability. Routine. No speculation. No speculation, another aide shot back. Half the country's already speculating. At the head of the table, the king's private secretary spoke quietly. Then we'll drown them in normality. The less we say, the less they can question. So the first statement went out, short, sterile, and cold. The Princess Royal sustained minor injuries following a brief security disturbance at her private residence. She is recovering comfortably. Minor injuries. Brief disturbance. Comfortably. 3 words that erased an entire night of blood, panic, and broken trust. But the truth was leaking faster than they could spin it. A guard, off duty the next day, spoke to a journalist. A nurse whispered to a friend. A staff member texted a relative. And within 24 hours, the palace's polished statement was unraveling thread by thread. One reporter from the Times received a chilling message from an anonymous source inside the Royal Protection Unit. She was bleeding. It wasn't minor. They're covering it. The paper didn't print it. Not yet, but the story spread anyway. Social media, tabloid editors, international press all began circling like vultures. And the palace responded the way it always has, by tightening control. Staff were issued new NDAs overnight. Security logs were classified. Mobile phones were confiscated from several guards under the guise of technical review. Anyone who spoke risked losing not just their job, but their career in the royal network forever. Inside Buckingham, the cleanup began. Bloodstains removed, floors buffed, the broken wall camera replaced, evidence tagged, and quietly transported to a private royal archive. When investigators returned 2 days later, half the physical evidence was gone. Routine maintenance, they were told. There's that phrase again. Routine. But the air inside the estate had changed. Guards moved slower. Conversations stopped when superiors entered the room. Even N's dogs barked differently, unsettled, restless. Something was off. And then came the strangest order of all. All external communications regarding the incident had to be routed through one contact only, a man named Sir Malcolm Weller, a royal crisis coordinator known for making problems disappear. Weller's nickname inside the palace was the Eraser. His job wasn't to solve scandals. It was to rewrite them. And rewrite he did. Within 48 hours, reporters who'd been investigating suddenly received polite calls from palace representatives. Some were offered exclusive future access. Others were quietly reminded of the long-standing partnership between the press and the crown. The message was clear: back off. But even the best eraser can't scrub blood from marble forever. Because buried somewhere inside the machinery of the cover-up was one person who refused to stay quiet.